We see it. And all of a sudden, the family begins to say things. Why don't you talk to me? You know, why are you always angry? Right? Why are you always stressed? Why every time I ask you something, why do I get these short responses? Why is it that you don't want to open up? Right? You feel and you got the people in your circle walking on eggshells. That means you come home and everybody in the house is having a good time. The mood in the house is going very well. And then all of a sudden, you come home and you shut down the entire spirit of the house. And now everybody's being quiet until you can gather yourself. You're coping. Today's conversation is honest, it's real, and it's necessary. When Black men don't heal and just cope, it destroys the entire Black family. This is about understanding Black men, understanding their pain, their survival, their silence, and most importantly, understanding the difference between coping and healing. Now, these are just some facts that, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, only about 37.9% of Black adults with mental health issues receive the treatment, which means the majority of men who need it, they don't get it. The Department of Health and Human Services and the Office of Minority Health, they report that African Americans are less likely to receive mental health services and more likely to receive lower quality care, more likely to end treatment early. And so when we zoom in a little bit and focus on Black men, the National Institute of Health highlights that high exposure to trauma, chronic stress linked to racism and discrimination, and the underdiagnosed or the misdiagnosis leads to lower rates of helping and seeking behavior. So let's translate that. The Black men are often carrying invisible stress. They're carrying unprocessed trauma, and they're carrying emotional burdens alone. So in doing so, in this culture, we see that being strong is what we tell them, and handle it and man up. These are the talk that leads us to just learning how to cope. These are the lived experiences in an unhealthy way that we have to jump into. So why bother? Because I got a question. When was the last time, brothers, that you felt emotionally safe? When was the last time someone asked, how are you really doing? You say, I'm good. And they said, no, 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 no. How are you really doing? And when was the last time you admitted, even to yourself, that I'm tired? Mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, when was the last time you had that type of honesty with yourself and someone who cares deeply for you? Even your family may begin to question this. Do you feel like you're like he's present? Pay attention to this, right? You've got these individuals in your family. Do you really feel like they're being present, or do they tend to behave in a distant manner? Does he talk about stress, or does he bottle it up? Does he de-escalate, or does he tend to escalate very quickly? Or does he shut down and during emotional conflicts and then just go silent? These are indicators that the brother might just be coping and not doing the work that's needed around healing. So let's just talk about the difference, because I think it's important that we really understand what healing versus coping looks like. Now, coping is how we manage discomfort in the short term. So coping is real, and there's a role for coping, right? It helps us function. Coping helps us to even survive under pressure. So coping shows up and takes these types of form, right? You stay busy to avoid overthinking, or you become a workaholic to kind of cope and compensate and get your mind off of things. You engage in emotional avoidance, right? These are the things that you do to just kind of get you through the moment, right? Distracting with entertainment. Some of us cope with substance abuse. Some of us minimize the pain. Some of us talk about our pain in such a humorous manner that everybody misses it. We like to deflect. We find ourselves engaged in what's called emotional numbness. So coping has a place. It's temporary, but when it becomes part of your lived experience, now we got problems. Why? Because coping says, I just need to get through this. It says, and sometimes, and the coping then moves us to another level. Coping says that's necessary to do this. So I need to get this off my mind, right? I need to stay busy. I need to do these things. These are the messages that coping tells us. But coping becomes dangerous when it turns into a lifestyle instead of a temporary strategy. And so I'm going to value and honor the coping, and because it is a necessity and it is something that we all need to do, but coping does not ask what's needed in order for us to heal. It asks, how do I avoid feeling this pain? And so coping has a role, and it becomes a part of that lifestyle, and now it begins to impact several areas because coping helps us feel safe in that moment, right? Coping becomes familiar. We know about it. We know how to run to that, right? It feels masculine. We man up. We do all these tough things. It feels safer than what's required towards the healing process, which is vulnerability. So coping has a place. It's something we're familiar with. We understand that coping is the part, even embedded in some of our childhood messages, right? You tell your son, boy, man up, dust yourself up, get up, right? Stop crying. These are the languages of the message. So we start teaching coping at a very early age. We're telling them, don't show weakness. Never let them see you sweat. These are powerful messages. Handle your business. That's what we tell them. That's not healing. That's just saying, I'm going to show everybody how I can take these blows and hide it. But over time, the emotions become suppressed. It becomes ignored. It becomes misunderstood. And then comes all the health issues, right? The chronic diabetes, the ulcers, the headaches. So there are some consequences when coping is our only tool. Healing is not about being fixed. It's not about being fixed. Healing, on the other hand, is about understanding your emotional world. So we take the coping and then we move to the understanding what healing begins to look like. Healing helps us begin to process our past wounds. I told and I've shared before several times, the greatest lies that we tell ourselves is that I'm going to let it ride, I'm going to let it slide, and I'm going to let it go. But coping tells us to just put it on the emotional shelf. But healing says, I need to address it right then on this moment, because healing teaches us how to develop more healthier responses in the long run. Learning how to rewrite our internal narratives, learning to say, I'm going to get through this right now, but then I'm going to go back and I need to really kind of look at this a little bit more. So healing is part of the journey of building what I call emotional awareness. Emotional awareness is the part that we need to understand that we are now able to see how our coping and things that we're going through are really began to impact us. So in reality, the notion of manning up avoids the healing that needs to take place. So we got to do this work here, acknowledging pain, naming the emotion, finding the root cause of what's going on. Right? I'm going to always argue about a therapist, but I'm also going to say that when you stop in your own mindful time and begin to ask yourself, why did you respond a certain way? Or whether or not if you could have handled a situation differently. The healing process is about challenging some of our harmful beliefs and getting to the point of trying to practice some new behaviors. So the healing process is a journey, and it works especially if you can involve others and get people permission to aid you in that healing process. So healing in that process, when we're in our reflection, when we are sharing with family members what we're going through, that allows for us to talk out loud and have conversations, because the healing is going to do that. The healing is going to ask, what happened to me? Not what's wrong with you, but what happened to me? That healing process is important because when you can ask yourself that, and when you can be courageous enough to begin to answer that for yourself, the healing process is taking place. When you do something that you later regret or do something that you really realize you could have done differently, the healing process is going to pause and say, what did I learn from that? If you're not asking yourself about what did you learn from certain situations, you got through it, you got through the fire, you don't look back, you're learning and you're focusing on the art of coping. But healing is going to challenge us to ask that question of what needs to change in my belief system and in my behavior system right now. Healing is growth and self-awareness. It's scary. It's time consuming. It is a little unnerving, but the real process that we have to put in place to get through it so that we won't rehash and revisit old behaviors, or that how we respond to stress becomes so incredibly predictable, then that means we've mastered the art of coping. So I want to kind of pause for a second and be a little bit more intentional here. I want to make a distinction or provide some signs that a man may be coping and not healing. So here's some signs. Number one, he's coping if, here we go, he avoids emotional conversations. He gets irritated when feelings begin to arise. You're coping. You shut down during a conflict. I'm good. I don't know. I'm good. Right? You stay consistently distracted. That means that the coping, and this is interesting, you don't like to be by yourself. The notion of quiet time, right, becomes a little challenging. You know you're coping because now the substance abuse becomes your tool to relax. You got to smoke a weed or you got to take some shots to bring yourself down. That means the coping occurs now because now suddenly you're unable to bring your own self down. You minimize stress, right? That automatic response. I'm good. No, I'm good. Everybody can see you're not good, but I'm good. You're coping. Feels emotionally numb. We can actually see it on your face that when the coping gets overwhelming, right? Experiences subtly, quickly move you to a state of anger. All of this leads to increased anxiety. It leads to increased depression. It leads to chronic stress, right? The world of coping. It leads to sleep problems. To ask someone, when was the last time you slept? 7 hours? Man, I'm good if I get 3, right? You're even coping in your dream. But the reality is you become emotionally unstable. So the impact of coping can impact everyone in your circle, even within the context of the family. When you reach the point now you're coping all the time in the family, emotional distance begins to occur. Communication with the family and the children, it gets short. Communication breakdowns begin to happen more frequently. Y'all going in on the concept of coping, right? Increased tension. We can see it. Y'all ever see somebody that's cracking their knuckles all the time? Man, what's wrong? I'm good, right? So the increased attention is going there. Feeling unheard and feeling shut out. We see it. And all of a sudden, the family begins to say things. Why won't you talk to me? Why are you always angry? Right? Why are you always stressed? Why every time I ask you something, why do I get these short responses? Why is it that you don't want to open up? Right? You feel and you got the people in your circle walking on eggshells. That means you come home and everybody in the house is having a good time. The mood in the house is going very well. And then all of a sudden you come home and you shut down the entire spirit of the house. And now everybody's being quiet until you can gather yourself. You're coping. And your coping is now all of a sudden not meeting the needs of the healing, what the healing is called for. So even our children, when they're trying to deal with your inability to truly cope, because coping is a temporary mechanism, so now the children can see it. They're now seeing how you handle emotions. They see how you handle conflicts, and they're even afraid to kind of challenge things, which is a natural thing for children. But they're watching how you handle coping. They are watching the conflicts and the way you deal with disagreements, even within the family. So then all of a sudden, because coping is your primary mechanism, you have inadvertently taught your children how to cope. You've taught them how to feel. You've even told them that feeling is dangerous, especially our boys. You begin to teach them that men don't talk and anger is the only emotion that is allowed. So the family becomes impacted, the children are impacted. So we're going to take the concept of coping and set it aside, and we're going to start with the steps that need to be taken towards the healing process. First and foremost, start small. I'm not asking you to get on a complete healing journey. I'm going to tell you, just name how you feel. Just begin to talk about it. Instead of I'm pissed off, I'm effed up, whatever, you name it and articulate it. I feel down. I feel let down. I feel overwhelmed. Begin to name it so people can understand what's going on. Acknowledge stress. You know, again, the one of the challenges with coping, it teaches us to limit our vocabulary. But when you can acknowledge stress, you know what? I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. You imagine that's not an indication of your vulnerability or your weakness because you're feeling overwhelmed, but it's okay to begin to even articulate it. Talk to someone safe. Brothers, I'm going to tell you, and I've said this before, that men bring peace to the house, a woman will convert the house to a home. Brothers, if your home is not a place of peace, where you're allowed to be vulnerable, because when you get home and you bring those failed coping mechanisms with you, and now you are teaching the family how to cope, it becomes problematic. So I'm going to tell you to talk to someone. Understand that 85% of the people in your life got your best interests at heart. Only 15% of the people, from my assessment, got their own best interests at heart, or got their or don't have your best interests at heart. But when we start failing in how we cope, we will treat the 85% of the people the same way we treat the 15%. And now the 85% of the people, your wife, your children, those who legitimately care for you or concerned from you, they can't come to you and engage you in the process. So the healing process here is going to give people permission to aid you in that process. And I'm going to tell you, consider therapy. Find a therapist, find someone that you can talk to. And you know, the beautiful thing in the mental health world is this thing called confidentiality. Outside of the threat of hurt, harm, or danger to yourself or someone else, much and everything that we talked about is this is your safe, sacred, and healing place when you go to therapy. And so these are the things in the healing process that becomes important. I mean, brothers, I'm going to tell you also, in that healing process, journal your thoughts. You know, there's a journal that I'm working on. It's called Count and Document Your Blessings. And that part is really just kind of saying that you don't look like what you've been through. And so you're going to write about it, you're going to talk about it. Journaling, and when you do journal, because this is part of the healing process, here's what I need you to do. I just don't want you to write about the shit that you were going through and all the problems. I need you, when you get out of it, a situation, when you come to the other end, that's when I want you to be intentional about getting to the journal. You could write in the journal when you're going through something, approaching it, you're in the middle of it. But if you don't go back to that journal and write about how you got through it, then you have a journal is a great book of all the challenges and issues, but you have an empty book on how you got through it. So I want you to count and document your blessings. Another way to put it, that my mind looks back and wonder how I got over, and now you're going to begin to write about it, right? Slow down the avoidance patterns is another thing as part of the healing process. That yes, you don't have to avoid it all the time. Sometimes it's important, especially when it's someone in your inner circle, like your children or your family, to begin to talk with them, even within conflicts. It's not always good to take a time out and walk away. As a therapist, I'm going to even tell someone who uses that as an avoidance tool, I'm going to say, walk away and then do what? Walk away and then think what? So walking away is not always the best thing to do if you don't necessarily have the tools that you need. The debriefing or the reflecting that needs to take place in that timeout is when things get lost. Healing does not require perfection. It only requires the willingness for change. So here's what I want you all to understand. It's important that we understand that change in of itself, if done right, it will change relationships. It will change our parenting styles. It will create an emotional legacy. It will create family stability. So change is good. Coping keeps us functioning, but healing transforms your life. I'm Dr. Gary White, and this is my message, and I hope it resonates with everyone. I'm going to challenge you and invite you to share this message and discuss it with people. I'm going to invite you to reflect, and more importantly, I want you to remember that healing is not just personal, healing is generational.